I stood in my custom silk wedding dress, the delicate lace suddenly feeling like barbed wire against my skin. Across the ballroom, my parents, the people who sacrificed everything for me, were tucked behind a swinging kitchen door. When I confronted my mother-in-law, her response didn't just break my heart, it shattered my marriage. The warning signs were always there, dressed in designer labels and masked by thin, polite smiles. When I first introduced Liam Sterling to my parents, the contrast was impossible to ignore. My dad, Thomas, was a retired high school English teacher who ran a small, dusty used bookstore in downtown Boston. My mom, Helen, was a former pediatric nurse who wore her heart on her sleeve and baked terribly dry but well-meaning casseroles. They were warm, loud, and hopelessly middle class. Liam's family, on the other hand, was a different breed entirely. The Sterlings were old money, the kind of wealth that whispered through the halls of their sprawling Connecticut estate. His mother, Beatrice Sterling, was the undisputed matriarch. She was a woman who never seemed to blink, her posture rigid, her blonde hair flawlessly coiffed, and her eyes sharp enough to cut glass. From the moment Liam slipped the 2-carat diamond ring onto my finger, Beatrice made it her personal mission to ensure our wedding reflected the Sterling legacy. "Stella, darling," Beatrice had purred during our first real wedding planning meeting, over $18 a cup artisanal tea. "We are simply thrilled to welcome you into the family. But you must understand, a Sterling wedding isn't just a celebration of love. It's a social event, an obligation to our circle. Let me handle the heavy lifting, I insist." I should have said no. I should have drawn a line in the sand right then and there. But Liam, sweet, conflict-avoidant Liam, squeezed my hand under the table. "Let her have this," his eyes begged. "It'll make everything easier." So, I compromised. My parents, bless them, were relieved. They had quietly set aside $10,000 for my wedding, a sum that took them 5 years to save, but it barely covered the floral budget Beatrice had drawn up for the rehearsal dinner alone. "Save it for a house, sweetheart," my dad had told me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Your mother and I just want to see you happy. If Beatrice wants to throw a royal gala, let her. As long as I get to walk my little girl down the aisle, I don't care if we're eating caviar or hot dogs." But as the months went on, the compromises began to feel like erasures. It started with the guest list. My parents were allotted exactly 20 spots for our side of the family, while Beatrice invited over 200 of her closest acquaintances, CEOs, politicians, and socialites I had never even heard of. Then came the dress shopping. Helen, my mother, had tears in her eyes when she pulled a classic A-line gown off the rack for me. Beatrice took one look at it, laughed a high, musical laugh, and said, "Oh, Helen, it's very sweet. But Stella is marrying a Sterling. She needs haute couture, not a prom dress." My mother had quietly hung the dress back up, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I ended up in a $15,000 Vera Wang gown that Beatrice paid for in full, a dress I felt like I was drowning in. Through it all, Liam was my anchor, though a somewhat oblivious one. "She's just stressed," he would say when I complained about his mother's overbearing nature. "She wants it to be perfect for us. Once the wedding is over, we'll go back to our normal lives, I promise." I clung to that promise. I convinced myself that the wedding was just a performance, a one-night show for Beatrice's high society friends. After that, Liam and I would be free. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Held in a grand, historic cathedral in the heart of the city, the afternoon sun filtered through the stained glass windows, bathing Liam and me in a kaleidoscope of colors. When my father walked me down the aisle, his hand trembling slightly over mine, I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated joy. He kissed my cheek, shook Liam's hand, and took his seat next to my weeping mother in the front row. For those 30 minutes, nothing else mattered. Not Beatrice, not the Sterlings, not the suffocating pressure of the past year. But the illusion shattered the moment we arrived at the reception. The reception was held at the Carrington, an ultra-exclusive club downtown that boasted chandeliers the size of small cars and a strict dress code. When Liam and I made our grand entrance, the room erupted into polite, restrained applause. The ballroom was breathtaking. Cascading towers of white orchids served as centerpieces. The tables were draped in shimmering gold, silk, and a 10-piece jazz band played softly on a raised stage. We took our seats at the sweetheart table, placed strategically at the center of the room. Liam kissed my temple. "We did it, Mrs. Sterling," he whispered. I smiled, my eyes scanning the room. The seating chart was the one thing Beatrice had flat out refused to let me see, claiming she was finalizing the delicate social dynamics up until the very last minute. Now, I wanted to find my parents. I wanted to see my dad's face when he saw the towering champagne fountain. I looked at the tables closest to us. Table 1. Immediately to our right, seated Beatrice, Liam's father James, and a man I recognized as a state senator. Table 2, to our left, was filled with Liam's aunts, uncles, and a famous real estate developer Beatrice was trying to woo for James's firm. I frowned, my gaze drifting further back. Tables 3, 4, 5. Mostly Liam's cousins. Some wealthy family friends. Where were Thomas and Helen? "Liam," I murmured, keeping my smile plastered on for the photographer circling us. Liam squinted into the crowd. They've got to be up front, right? Let me look." I didn't wait for him. I stood up, smoothing the massive skirt of my dress, and began to walk through the tables. Guests stopped me to offer congratulations, complimenting the food, the decor, the absolute perfection of the evening. I thanked them mechanically, my heart beginning to hammer a slow, anxious rhythm against my ribs. I walked past table 10, past table 15, past table 20. The farther back I went, the dimmer the lighting became. The extravagant orchid centerpieces were replaced by smaller, cheaper arrangements. Finally, at the very back of the massive ballroom, hidden behind a large decorative pillar, I found them. Table 28. It was pushed so far into the corner that it was practically in the hallway. Worse, it was located directly next to the swinging wooden doors of the kitchen. As I stood there, frozen in disbelief, a waiter carrying a massive tray of dirty plates burst through the doors. The heavy wood swung outward, violently slamming into the back of my father's chair. My dad lurched forward, gripping the table to steady himself. "Whoops, sorry about that, sir," the waiter muttered, not even pausing as he rushed past. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a napkin, her face pale, trying desperately to pretend everything was fine. Seated around them were the remaining members of my family, my Uncle Dave, my Aunt Susan, and my two cousins, all crammed onto a table meant for 8, holding 10. They were cut off from the music, cut off from the speeches, and completely cut off from me. "Dad?" I choked out. My father looked up, his face instantly breaking into a strained but loving smile. "Stella, honey, you look so beautiful. Don't you worry about us. We're doing just fine back here. Got a great view of well, we can hear the music." My mother grabbed my hand, her skin cold. "It's a wonderful party, sweetie. Go back to your new husband. We don't want to cause a fuss." A fuss? They were the parents of the bride. They had funded the dress on my mother's back. They had raised me, supported me, and now they were being treated like an embarrassing afterthought, shoved into the shadows, so Beatrice's society friends wouldn't have to look at them. A cold, hard fury ignited in my chest. It wasn't the fiery, explosive kind of anger. It was icy, sharp, and terrifyingly clear. "Stay right here," I told my father, my voice dropping an octave. "Stella, please," my dad pleaded, standing up. "It's your wedding day. Do not make a scene. We are perfectly happy." "I'm not," I said. I turned on my heel and marched back toward the front of the room. The heavy silk of my dress swished angrily around my legs. I didn't stop at the sweetheart table. I walked straight up to table 1, where Beatrice was laughing delightfully at something the senator had just said. "Beatrice," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but the sheer venom in it made the entire table fall dead silent. She looked up, her perfectly arched eyebrows drawing together in mild annoyance. "Stella, darling, is something the matter? You look positively flushed." A quick word. In the hall, I demanded. Liam, who had noticed my march across the room, was suddenly at my elbow. Stella, what's wrong? Your mother and I need to chat, I said, not taking my eyes off Beatrice. Beatrice sighed, a long, long-suffering sound, and stood up. She followed me out of the ballroom and into the quiet, carpeted corridor leading to the restrooms. As soon as the heavy doors closed, muffling the jazz band, I rounded on her. Why are my parents at table 28? I demanded. Beatrice blinked, adjusting the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. Table 28? Oh, yes. I believe that's where I placed the Davies family. By the kitchen? Behind a pillar? They are the parents of the bride, Beatrice. They should be at table 1 with you, or at the very least, table 2. Beatrice let out a patronizing little chuckle, glancing at Liam for support. When he said nothing, looking bewildered, she turned back to me, her mask of politeness slipping just a fraction. Stella, let us be adults here, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. This room is filled with some of the most influential people on the East Coast, people who can make or break Liam's career at the firm. I needed the prime real estate for guests who actually matter to our family's future. I felt the blood drain from my face. Guests who matter? Oh, don't look at me like that, she snapped, dropping the sweet mother-in-law act completely. Your parents are lovely people, I'm sure. But what exactly are they going to talk about with Senator Hastings? Used books? The price of generic groceries? They would be wildly out of place, and frankly, they would embarrass themselves. I did them a favor, Stella. I put them somewhere they wouldn't feel the need to pretend they belong in our world. Mom! Liam finally gasped, horrified. You can't say that. Oh, grow up, Liam, Beatrice sneered, turning her icy glare on her son. You knew exactly what we were dealing with when you brought her home. I paid for this ridiculous circus to keep up appearances. The least you two can do is let me manage the optics. She turned to walk away, as if the conversation was over. But as she reached the door, she paused and looked over her shoulder, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. Besides, Stella, I couldn't have your father sitting up front, not when he knows exactly what James did to keep this family afloat 10 years ago. Did you really think I'd let him sit next to the very people we're trying to impress? She pushed through the doors, leaving me and Liam standing in stunned, suffocating silence. The silence in the hallway was so absolute I could hear the faint, rhythmic ticking of the antique grandfather clock near the restrooms. Beatrice's final, venomous words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Not when he knows exactly what James did to keep this family afloat 10 years ago. I turned slowly to face my new husband. Liam's face had gone the color of old parchment. He was staring at the spot where his mother had just been, his jaw working as if trying to form words that refused to come. Liam, I said, my voice dangerously calm. What is she talking about? What did your father do? Liam swallowed hard, avoiding my eyes. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, ruining the expensive salon work. Stella, please. It's old family drama. It has nothing to do with us. My mother is just being dramatic to get under your skin. You know how she is. Do not lie to me, I hissed, taking a step toward him. The heavy silk of my Vera Wang gown felt like armor now. She said, my father knows. My dad, the high school English teacher who runs a dusty bookshop. What could he possibly know about James Sterling's multi-million-dollar empire? I don't know the whole story, Liam pleaded, his voice cracking. I swear, Stella, it was a long time ago, something to do with a bad investment the firm made. Just let it go. For tonight? Please? The photographer wants to do the cake cutting in 10 minutes. I stared at the man I had just vowed to spend the rest of my life with. In that moment, the boyish charm and easygoing nature I had fallen in love with suddenly looked exactly like what it was. Cowardice. He didn't want to protect me. He wanted to protect his comfort. Tell the photographer to wait, I snapped. I turned and pushed my way back through the heavy wooden doors, re-entering the dazzling, noisy ballroom. I ignored the confused looks of the guests at the nearby tables and marched straight past the towering champagne fountain, past the ice sculptures, and deep into the shadows of the back room. When I reached table 28, the waiter from earlier was just loudly dumping a pitcher of ice water into the center of the table, splashing my Aunt Susan's sleeve. My dad was trying to mop it up with a flimsy paper napkin. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling, "I need you to come with me. Right now." Thomas looked up, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. He dropped the napkin and stood, exchanging a worried glance with my mother. "Stella, sweetheart, what's going on? You're shaking." I pulled him away from the table, backing us into a quiet alcove near the kitchen's service elevator. The smell of roasted garlic and frying oil was pungent here. "Beatrice just told me why you're sitting back here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "She said you couldn't sit up front because you know what James did 10 years ago." "Dad, what did he do?" My father's face, usually so ruddy and full of life, instantly drained of all color. He looked like a man who had just been punched in the stomach. He leaned back against the cool plaster of the wall, closing his eyes for a long, painful second. "Dad, tell me," I demanded, tears finally threatening to spill over my mascara. "Liam claims he doesn't know. Beatrice is treating you like garbage because of it. What happened?" Thomas let out a heavy, ragged sigh. "I never wanted you to know, Stella. Your mother and I, we swore we would take it to our graves. We just wanted you to be happy." "I'm not happy, Dad. I'm married to a family that hates us." "Tell me." He looked at me, his eyes heavy with a decade of carried weight. 10 years ago, James Sterling wasn't the billionaire he is today. Sterling Capital was heavily leveraged, and the market took a massive dive. He was on the verge of total bankruptcy. I nodded slowly, remembering Liam mentioning once that his family had a tough year when he was in middle school, though it had never seemed to affect their lifestyle. "At the time," my dad continued, his voice steadying, "I was the union representative for the Bay State Educators Trust. It was the pension fund for our entire school district, 3,000 teachers, Stella. People who had spent their lives in classrooms, saving every penny for retirement. The school board had hired Sterling Capital to manage the fund. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. "Oh, God. James drained it," my father said bluntly. "He used our pension fund as collateral for a series of illegal, high-risk offshore bets to save his own sinking ship. And he lost. Nearly $40 million. Gone. But why didn't he go to prison? Why didn't it make the news?" "Because he covered it up," Thomas said bitterly. "He falsified the ledgers, blaming the losses on a rogue junior analyst, a kid who miraculously died in a car crash 2 weeks before the audit. But I found the real paper trail. One of the accountants at the firm felt guilty and mailed me the original flash drive before fleeing the state." "You had proof?" I gasped. "Dad, you could have destroyed him." "I tried," my dad whispered, looking down at his worn dress shoes. "I took the drive to the district attorney. But James found out. He intercepted me in the parking lot of the courthouse." My father looked up, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes broke my heart. "He didn't threaten me, Stella. He threatened you." I stopped breathing. "You were 17, he said softly, applying to pre-med programs. James showed me a file his private investigators had put together. He had photos of you at a high school party where there were drugs. He had people willing to testify, they sold them to you. He had the dean of admissions at your dream college in his pocket. He told me that if I walked into that courthouse, you would be arrested for intent to distribute before dinner, and you would never see the inside of a university." Tears spilled freely down my cheeks now. "Dad, I made a choice," Thomas said, his voice cracking. "I traded the pensions for my daughter's future. I handed over the flash drive. The teachers' union took a devastating haircut on our retirements. It's why I had to work until I was 70, why we couldn't afford a bigger wedding for you. James saved his company, became a titan of industry, and I became a coward who sells used books." "You are not a coward," I sobbed, throwing my arms around his neck. "You sacrificed everything for me. He extorted you." "I thought I could swallow it," he whispered into my hair. "When you brought Liam home, I recognized the name immediately. But I saw how you looked at him. I told myself the son shouldn't pay for the sins of the father. I told myself we could just get through today, and then we'd never have to deal with James or Beatrice again. I pulled back, wiping my face fiercely with the back of my hand, smearing my expensive makeup. The icy fury from earlier had returned, but it had morphed into something absolute and unbreakable. "You're right," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "We are never going to deal with them again. But first, we are going to fix this." I left my father in the alcove and strode back into the main ballroom. The room was in full swing now. The jazz band was playing a lively rendition of a Sinatra classic, waiters were pouring vintage champagne, and the wealthy elite of Connecticut were laughing, completely oblivious to the rot beneath the floorboards of this party. Liam intercepted me near the cake table. "Stella, there you are. Mom is asking where you went. We need to do the toasts. Are you okay? Your makeup is." "I know exactly what my makeup is doing, Liam," I said coldly. "Did you talk to your dad? Is everything smoothed over?" he asked, looking desperately hopeful. "Can we just enjoy our wedding now?" I looked at him, really looked at him. "Liam, did you know your father stole the teacher's pension fund 10 years ago to save his company?" Liam blanched. He looked left and right, terrified someone might overhear. "Stella, keep your voice down." "That was a rumor. A misunderstanding. My dad settled that out of court. It's ancient history." He knew. He might not have known the violent specifics of the blackmail, but he knew his family's wealth was built on the stolen retirements of my father's friends. And he didn't care. "Ancient history," I repeated slowly. "Right." Without another word, I walked away from him. I marched directly toward the raised stage where the 10-piece jazz band was playing. The band leader, a suave man playing the saxophone, gave me a questioning look as I approached, but I didn't hesitate. I climbed the 3 carpeted steps, walked up to the microphone stand at center stage, and tapped the mic. Thump, thump, thump. A loud squeal of feedback echoed through the cavernous ballroom. The band abruptly stopped playing. 250 heads turned to look at me. The chatter died down instantly, replaced by the clinking of silverware and confused murmurs. At table 1, Beatrice sat bolt upright, a horrified expression crossing her perfectly tightened face. James Sterling narrowed his eyes. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice booming through the state-of-the-art sound system. "I'm so glad you could all make it to celebrate this beautiful union." Liam was standing near the cake, frantic, making cut-it-out motions across his throat. I ignored him. "I want to take a moment to thank my mother-in-law, Beatrice Sterling, for throwing this incredible event," I continued, gesturing toward table 1. "She paid for these beautiful orchids. She paid for this stunning dress. She carefully curated this guest list to ensure only the most important and influential people were seated at the front of the room." A polite ripple of applause broke out. Beatrice offered a tight, forced smile, though her eyes were screaming at me to step down. "In fact," I said, my tone shifting, losing the polite bride cadence, "Beatrice was so concerned with the social dynamics of this room that she placed my parents, the parents of the bride, at table 28. I pointed to the back of the room. Heads turned. Guests craned their necks to look into the dim corner by the swinging kitchen doors. "They're right back there, next to the busboy station," I said loudly. Beatrice told me privately that they were seated there because they are middle class, because my father sells used books and my mother was a nurse, because they wouldn't know how to converse with people of your caliber. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw Senator Hastings, seated right next to Beatrice, slowly place his wine glass down, looking deeply uncomfortable. Beatrice was half out of her chair now. "Stella, that is enough," she hissed loudly. "But that's only half the truth," I pressed on, leaning into the microphone. "The real reason my father, Thomas Davies, is hidden in the dark is because his presence makes James Sterling uncomfortable. And why wouldn't it?" "Cut the mic!" James bellowed, standing up and pointing at the soundboard technician in the corner. "Don't you dare touch that board," I snapped, pointing directly back at the tech, who froze. I turned back to the crowd. "My father is the former union representative for the Bay State Educators Trust. Does that ring a bell for anyone in the financial sector here tonight? 10 years ago, James Sterling embezzled $40 million from that teacher's pension fund to save Sterling Capital from bankruptcy. The ballroom erupted into a chaotic murmur. It was no longer polite whispers. It was the sound of a scandal breaking in real time. He covered it up by framing a dead employee, and when my father found the proof, James threatened to frame me, a 17-year-old girl, for drug possession to ruin my life unless my father stayed quiet. My dad sacrificed his retirement so I could stand here today in this $15,000 dress. She's hysterical, James shouted, his face purple with rage. Security, get her off the stage. I looked down at Senator Hastings, who was staring at James with absolute disgust. Senator, I said directly to him, I believe you sit on the State Finance Oversight Committee. I highly suggest you look into the Sterling Capital audits from 2016. I'm sure my father would be happy to point you toward the discrepancies. I took a deep breath. The adrenaline was roaring in my ears, drowning out the shouting from Liam's family. I looked down at my left hand. The 2-carat diamond caught the light of the chandeliers, sparkling brilliantly. It felt like handcuffs. I slid the ring off my finger. The metal felt hot against my skin. I walked to the edge of the stage, where Liam was standing, pale and shaking, staring at me as if I were a stranger. You knew, I said to him, my voice carrying over the mic one last time. You knew what your family was, and you wanted me to just smile and eat cake. I tossed the ring. It hit Liam in the chest and bounced onto the expensive marble floor with a tiny, insignificant clink. I'm done compromising, I said into the microphone. I dropped it onto the stage. The resulting thud and feedback squeal echoed like a gunshot. I picked up the heavy skirt of my dress and walked down the steps. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. No one said a word. The wealthy, powerful elite simply stared as I walked the entire length of the ballroom, my head held high, straight toward the kitchen doors. My dad and mom were waiting for me at table 28. My father's eyes were filled with tears, but his posture was straighter than I had seen it in 10 years. Let's go home, I said. The cool, crisp air of the Boston night hit my face the moment we pushed through the service doors of the Carrington. I was still wearing the $15,000 Vera Wang gown, dragging the heavy silk train across the grease-stained pavement of the alleyway, but I had never felt lighter in my entire life. My mother, Helen, was crying softly, holding onto my father's arm as if he were the only solid thing left in the world. My dad, Thomas, walked with a purposeful stride I hadn't seen since I was a little girl. We didn't wait for the valet to bring around the rented limousine. Instead, my dad hailed a passing yellow cab. It was cramped. It smelled faintly of stale pine air freshener, and my dress took up the entire back seat, forcing my parents to squash together up front. It was the best ride of my life. We drove in silence, the neon city lights washing over us, until we reached my parents' modest, 2-story house in the suburbs. Once inside, my mother unzipped the suffocating wedding gown. I stepped out of it, leaving the mountain of white silk pooling on the cheap linoleum floor of my childhood bedroom. I put on a pair of worn-out sweatpants and my dad's oversized college hoodie. The armor was off. The war had just begun. By 7 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting at the worn oak kitchen table, nursing a mug of black coffee, when my phone vibrated. It hadn't stopped buzzing since midnight, but this text was from my best friend and bridesmaid, Sarah. Stella. Look at Twitter. Look at the local news blogs. I clicked the link she sent. My stomach dropped, then soared. A guest, likely one of the younger cousins, seated near the back, had pulled out their phone the moment the microphone fed back on stage. The entire speech, from my condemnation of Beatrice's seating chart to the devastating revelation of James's embezzlement, was captured in stark, high-definition video. The video already had 400,000 views. The caption read, "Bride exposes billionaire father-in-law's pension fraud at own wedding." "Dad," I called out, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and triumph. "You need to see this." Before my father could even put his reading glasses on, a frantic, aggressive pounding, echoed from our front door. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. I pulled the door open to find Liam standing on the porch. His tuxedo was severely wrinkled, his tie was gone, and his eyes were bloodshot. The polished, golden boy facade had completely melted away, leaving a desperate, angry man in its place. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Liam demanded, his voice cracking as he pushed past me into the hallway. "My father's phone has been ringing off the hook since 5 a.m. The board of directors at Sterling Capital is calling an emergency meeting. The press is camped outside my parents' estate." "Good," my father said, stepping out of the kitchen, his posture rigid. "It's about time." Liam sneered, turning his anger on my dad. "You're crazy. My father destroyed the evidence 10 years ago. You have nothing but a crazy girl's rant on a microphone. My family will sue you for defamation. We will bury you in legal fees until you lose this pathetic little house." My dad didn't flinch. He walked over to the hall closet, reached up to the top shelf, and pulled down an old, battered shoebox where he kept his spare reading glasses and spare keys. He opened it, dug past a pile of receipts, and pulled out a small, silver object, a USB flash drive. Liam's face went chalk white. "I taught high school English, Liam," my father said softly, holding the drive up to the light. "I spent my career analyzing Shakespeare and Greek tragedies. I know the fatal flaw of arrogant men. Did your father honestly believe I would hand over the only copy of the ledger? I gave him the original. I kept the decrypted backup in a safety deposit box for 9 years and brought it home last week, just in case he ever decided to come after Stella again." Liam stumbled backward, gripping the doorframe for support as the reality of his family's impending doom washed over him. "I'm filing for an annulment on Monday," I told Liam, my voice devoid of any warmth, "on the grounds of fraud. Tell Beatrice I'll mail the dress back to her in a garbage bag. Now get out of my house." What followed over the next 6 months was a masterclass in the swift, brutal collapse of an empire. Senator Hastings, the man Beatrice had so desperately tried to impress at Table 1, was a political shark who smelled blood in the water. True to my words on stage, he immediately launched an inquiry into the Bay State Educators Trust. Armed with the viral video, intense public pressure, and the undeniable, hard-coded proof from my father's backup drive, the state attorney general unsealed the 2016 audits. The fallout was catastrophic for the Sterlings. The indictment. James Sterling was arrested at his Connecticut estate on a Tuesday morning. The FBI charged him with wire fraud, embezzlement, and extortion. He was denied bail due to his significant offshore flight risk assets. The corporate collapse. Sterling Capital's stock plummeted to pennies within a week. Institutional investors fled en masse. The firm filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and Liam, whose entire career was propped up by nepotism, was unceremoniously ousted by the federal receivers managing the dissolution. The social exile. Beatrice Sterling became a pariah overnight. The country clubs revoked her memberships, her charity gala invitations vanished, and the high society friends she valued over human decency pretended they had never met her. She was forced to sell the estate to pay for James's mounting legal defense. The restitution. A massive class action lawsuit was filed against the remaining assets of Sterling Capital. While the teachers wouldn't get back every single penny of the $40 million, a victims' compensation fund was established, securing a massive settlement that restored a significant portion of my father's and his colleagues' retirements. As for me, the annulment went through with zero resistance. The Sterlings were too busy fighting federal prosecutors to care about a voided marriage. One evening, about a year after the wedding that never truly was, I found myself sitting on the front porch with my dad. We were drinking cheap iced tea, watching the fireflies dance in the muggy summer air. "You know," my dad said, swirling the ice in his glass, "the medical school at Boston University does spring admissions." I looked at him, a knot forming in my throat. When James had threatened to ruin my life with fake drug charges 10 years ago, I had abandoned my pre-med track, terrified that any background check or spotlight would trigger his wrath. I had settled for a quiet, safe desk job in medical billing instead. "I'm 27, Dad," I said quietly. "Isn't it too late?" "Stella," he smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "We just took down a billionaire with a speech and a $10 flash drive. I don't think anything is too late." The next morning, I requested my transcripts and began studying for the MCAT. I didn't need the sterling name, I didn't need an inheritance, and I certainly didn't need an invitation to the front table. I had my freedom, I had the truth, and I had the strongest, most courageous parents in the world. Table 28 wasn't a punishment, it was my ultimate salvation. It exposed the Sterling's toxic, gilded facade before their world could trap me forever. I gladly walked away from the money, the prestige, and a cowardly marriage built on devastating lies. Today, I know my true worth isn't determined by a cruel wedding seating chart, but by the fiercely loyal parents who sacrificed everything when the glamorous illusion finally shattered.